So in the fall of 2014, Reyna left her practice as a criminal appellate attorney with a nonprofit public defender's office where she'd worked for many years. It was time to try something new. What began as a lark when she enrolled in a writing class at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College has turned into her passion. Inspired by her work as a public defender, Reyna's first novel, Unreasonable Doubts, was published by She Writes Press in 2018 and named a finalist in the Women's Fiction Writers Association Star Award for debut fiction. My Name is Layla, for middle grade readers, features a dyslexic protagonist and is a story about resilience, empathy, and self-acceptance. With both are true, Reyna has returned to women's fiction, the law, and New York City. I always like to say that uncorking a story is about the stories behind the story. So Reyna, tell me, where does your author story begin?
Oh, wow. So it really does begin when I left practicing law. And I know a lot of people go back a lot further than that. They always wanted to be a writer. They always had it in their head that they would write novels or short stories or something else. And I really was not that person. I like to say that there was a woman in my first year law school class who really wanted to be a novelist, and she dropped out after our first year. And by the time we graduated, she had a beautiful book published, and she was living her dream, and it was great. And I admired her, but it wasn't my dream. And, I really would say that my author story and my writing began when I stopped practicing law.
Okay. Well, I do want to rewind a little bit because I wanted to dig into like what drew you to the legal profession in the first place. Was that what you wanted to be when you were a kid? Did you grow up thinking that you'd be a lawyer, or do you have other dreams?
I definitely did not grow up thinking I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't really know any lawyers. We didn't have lawyers in the family. I didn't have much of a sense of what lawyers did. I was more just a good humanities student. I knew I wasn't a sciencey type. My two older sisters are both doctors, and I kind of toyed with the idea of that for a little while. But once I started taking, chemistry and biology and all these classes on the college level, I realized that was not for me. So no, I think, when I was small, what did I want to be? I wanted to be Miss America. I don't know if that may be a universal wish. I'm not sure, but that was definitely my passion. So no, I came to law pretty much, I was maybe a junior in college, and I started looking for a summer job and trying to figure out what I would do when I graduated. And I actually worked the summer of my junior year at a hospital doing research on kids who had been abused and neglected. And the research was focusing on whether kids who are in that kind of situation, are they also getting their routine medical care? Are their parents taking them for routine care where such abuse and neglect might be noticed by the doctors?
Yeah.
And it was fascinating work. And I kind of got into the whole idea of maybe representing children. And that was the first job I had out of law school, was in the family court doing that.
Wow. It's interesting. When I was an undergraduate at the University of Connecticut, I was studying psychology, and I was going to go off and get my PhD. And I was fortunate enough to have an advisor who pushed me to do undergraduate research during my senior year. And my undergraduate research was in child abuse and trauma.
Wow.
And whether or not there was a relationship between a higher acceptance of aggression in adulthood. So not quite the same as what you were studying, but certainly there. So so your first sort of assignment outside of law school was kind of working in family courts. What were some key takeaways you walked away with from that experience?
To me, family court is like the most intense place that you find the law interacting with people's lives. I know there's all sorts of, I did criminal law for many, many years, so I know that that's also a very intense area, but something about being in the midst of these families and trying to understand what would be the best way to help them out of the situations that they've either created for themselves or found themselves in. I think it's remarkable. And the people, I guess one of the things I really took away is that there's so many different players in family court, right? Like it's not just the family, like you're kind of envisioning that it's just the parents and the kids, but really the social workers, the people that work for the city, the judges, the prosecutors, everybody is playing such a pivotal role in such different roles. And, that kind of interplay really stayed with me. And it features a lot in the third book that I wrote, because it stayed with me, because I thought about how does a judge view all this? How do you get into it as a person who is not part of the family, right? You're not actually responsible for these people on a certain level, but in another level, you really are responsible for them. And how do you figure that out, and how do you figure out as a human being what your role is in these cases?
Yeah, I imagine like the stories must stay with you. Um,
They did. A lot of the stories stayed with me. I mean, one of the images that I never forgot, and did work its way into the manuscript, was that one day I was in court. Normally when a parent is charged with abuse or neglect, the family is seen by social services before the case comes to court, and assessed. And, they try to figure out what would be the best thing for the children. And if the children need to be removed temporarily from the home, it happens before the case ever gets to court. But sometimes if the parent is withholding or the parent is kind of hiding the kids, the ruse is that the social worker will tell them, you bring the kids to court, we have a court date, and then they come in and they take the kids right there in court. And I have only seen it once, but it was really honestly one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. I mean, it was basically an ambush, and it's an ambush for good cause, right? I mean, these kids needed to be out of this house, at least temporarily. But, to walk into court with your children and then all of a sudden somebody comes and removes them from you, it's just, and I will never forget the sound that mother made. I mean, she screamed as if, somebody had stabbed her. And I'm sure that is very much what it felt like for her.
Yeah.
So, some of those scenes definitely stayed with me. And this is, going back a long time now. So.
Well, I mean, so you worked in the legal profession for how long before you started writing your first novel?
I worked for 23 years.
All right, so that's that's a lifetime. Now, were you always in the family system, or?
No, I worked, initially I worked at a big law firm just for a year, just to see whether I could stomach it and make some money. But it really wasn't for me. So that was just for a year. And then I got the opportunity to clerk for a judge for a year, which was a fabulous experience for a young attorney to work. I worked with a federal judge, and it was wild. And then I worked in family court for 3 years. And then after that, I switched to doing appellate work, like a legal aid kind of spinoff. It wasn't legal aid. The family court work had been at legal aid. This was like a spinoff, and it was representing adults who had been convicted of felonies in the state of New York and were seeking to appeal their convictions. And I was there for almost 18 years.
Wow. So kind of doing that work for people who were perhaps unjustly sort of convicted, trying to get those convictions overturned.
Either get the convictions overturned, or more often to get them a new trial. If something had gone wrong that was a fundamental fairness issue, that they deserved a new trial, it didn't necessarily mean that they weren't guilty of the crime. And most of the time when they got a new trial, they would be convicted of the crime again, but at least the trial itself would be fair. So it's very much representing the system. I mean, you're obviously representing individual clients, but I think the way many defense attorneys, or at least I did, could stomach it, is that you're really defending the system of criminal justice that we have in this country. Right.
So leading up to 2014, which is when you left your job, left your post, one could say. What was kind of going on in your life at the time, and what were some of the sort of the factors kind of influencing you to make a change? Whether that change was going to be writing, maybe that was an unknown at the time, but what were some of the things that were just kind of pushing you in a different direction?
So I think a lot of it is kind of a stage of life kind of thing. My kids were not out of the house, but definitely in their teenage years. And I felt like I had more of an opportunity to maybe do something different, to not feel like I needed to always be where I was and know what I was doing. I could take a little more risk. And luckily I was in a financial position that, I understood that I could leave that job and not immediately get another job that would be paying me money as opposed to writing books. So, I think I had a lot of kind of lifestyle things going on that kind of said, maybe this is the time. And as I said, I had been doing it for a long time. So I just, there was the commute there, there's always lots of things that are going on that you just feel like wow, now I really need to do something else.
Yeah. All right. So talk to me about when writing comes into play. So you enrolled in a course. Tell me, how did you come across this course at Sarah Lawrence, and what did you learn about yourself as you started that course?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. So I was quitting my job. As I say, I had really no direction of what I was going to do. And this friend said to me, come take this class with me at Sarah Lawrence. I'm taking a class. And I said, well, what kind of class is it? And she said, it's on memoir writing. And I kind of rolled my eyes. I said, listen, I am not writing a memoir. Like, I'm an interesting enough person, but I don't have a life that, deserves memoir treatment. And she said, no, just come with me. I think it's going to be fun. And, let's just see what it is. And I went with her. And, I've told her, and I tell her all the time, she changed my life, because I went in there kind of with an open mind and not a lot on my plate, nothing committing me to anything else. And I really learned that memoir is not necessarily writing your whole life story. Like, if you've done something amazing, of course, but if you really look at anyone's life, there are moments that you can write about that are pivotal to you. And if you think about them hard enough, you can find a way to write about them that will relate to other people. It's moments, relationships you've had, or relationships, with your mother, or with your clergy, or with whoever it's with, that you've had like meaningful moments with. If you can figure out a way to write those, to bring out the emotional elements that other people can say, well, this is not my story, this is not my relationship with my mother, but I understand where she is, and I understand why it was meaningful. And I spent a year in the class. I wrote a lot of short pieces about different important people and different important moments in my life. And, when I was done, I kind of thought, like, maybe I could actually turn some of this into something bigger, and, a bigger project. So that's kind of where it all got started.
So that's where you got bit by the bug.
I did. I mean, and you know what? I mean, it, like you do, like you start to publish small things, a 3-page essay about something that was meaningful to you. And all of a sudden, if you're doing it on the internet, for example, an internet magazine, people are writing in and saying, wow, that meant something to me, or I remember a moment like that with my mother, or whatever it is. And, and you do get the bug, because it's that interaction. It's not, it's not like fame and fortune. It's just that someone is reading your words and getting something out of them and wanting to interact with you. And that's huge.
Yeah, that instant validation is, and I sometimes I feel a little bit guilty about it, because I'll throw things up on social media, like as you were talking about, this isn't my mother, but I was thinking about a time when I was writing, not writing, I was doing a fundraiser for our local cancer center here in Stamford. And I just instead of saying, hey, this is Mike, I'm doing a 10K, would love your donation, I wrote a story about my mother-in-law who had passed away from cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And that just brief story, I mean, we're talking 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs at most. It led to, first of all, a lot of, hey, that's a beautiful story.
Right.
Would love to know more about your mother-in-law, to, lots of donations coming into the Bennett Cancer Center. So, I realized that just the way you frame things and how you share certain things can make all the difference. But it's also that validation that kind of fuels us a little bit, because
Right.
you write something and you want to get some feedback on it. And
Right.
That's an important part of the writing process that I don't think a lot of readers may not realize, that, how much, feedback as we are writing plays a role in what it is we eventually put out there.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's hard, because you find yourself, asking for reviews or whatever it is. And that's not a great feeling. You don't want to have
No.
to ask for that. And you don't want it to sound like, you have to tell me it's great because I need to hear that to get up the next morning. But, there's an element there. I mean, there definitely is.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think classes and just even having like other writers to network with and even meet up with regularly to share your work with is so important, because these
Yeah,
are
for
people
sure.
who they have no vested interest in your outcome. If anything, there might even be a little professional jealousy there. I mean,
Right.
and I certainly notice that. I also do stand-up comedy, and I notice that when I talk to comedians, it's they're the people in the room who are hoping that you fail when you go on stage.
Right. Oh,
Thankfully,
no.
the writers are a little bit more kind, I think, about it. But
Yeah.
so tell me, so what was the sort of the genesis of your first novel, Unreasonable Doubts? I love the title, by the way,
Thank you.
Unreasonable Doubts. But what was the genesis of that?
So it was definitely based largely on the work that I had been doing, and probably a little bit too obviously autobiographical, but not in the big picture. I mean, in the big picture, the protagonist has a little bit of a dalliance with one of her clients, and that was definitely not autobiographical. But
This is
you know, it was,
it's a judgment-free zone here, though. I
yeah,
mean, if it
no, but
were,
it's, yeah, no, I know, but it wasn't. And that was definitely the first question I got in every book group I did. Did this happen? But it was definitely inspired by the office that I worked in. A lot of the characters were drawn from characters, real people who worked in the office. And the book itself followed a case that I had handled on appeal, a rape case where the defendant won a second trial based on a DNA problem, a problem with the DNA evidence. So, in some ways it was easy for me to write because it was fueled by a lot of things. It was fueled by the fact that I just quit the job, and that, even though it was my doing to quit the job, it was a big turning point in my life. And there was sort of a lot of emotions involved with, why I had left, and what I was going to do with myself. And so in that way, it flowed very easily because there was a lot of emotional backing to it. And then also it kind of had a very built-in structure because it was based on his case. So I kind of knew, by X chapter, he has to have, the attorney has to have found the winning issue. And by X chapter, he has to get out of jail. And by such and such chapter, maybe they get together. But, so it was kind of, yeah, that's kind of the genesis of it.
Okay. And tell me, how did you work through the publishing process on that?
So, coming to writing at sort of a later age it can be difficult. And especially, I think, I don't know if other guests have told you this, but, when you are not that savvy about the whole social media realm, when you don't have much of a platform, trying to get yourself an agent and trying to do things that way is really difficult. So I did try for a while because everyone told me you have to query, you have to get an agent. That's the only way to do it. And, the big lesson I learned, I think, out of all of it was there's a million ways to get your work out there. And there's just no point in getting, stymied by the fact that you're not going to do things one way or the traditional way. So I ended up going with what they call a hybrid press. She Writes Press, which is a wonderful publisher who she publishes mostly women. She tries to kind of even the playing field a little bit that way. And, you do have to make an investment of your own in it as well. But it gets turned around in other ways. You get much higher royalties, whatever. It's a business model, and
Yeah.
it's not your standard traditional publisher. But the book came out beautifully, and I was, they distribute to everybody, and I was able to get out there with it and enter contests and do whatever I wanted to do with it. So for me, it worked out well.
Yeah, I mean, it was a finalist in women's fiction, the Women's Fiction Writers Association. So that's a big feather in the cap, so to speak.
Yeah, it was very exciting. I mean, I had no idea. I just figured I'd throw it in there, and you have no idea what anyone's going to think of anything, and
Yeah.
that worked out. So.
And it seems like you pivoted for the second novel, going more to sort of a middle grade readers with My Name is Layla. Tell me why, was that just an interest of yours to try and do something completely different, or what was the motivation behind that?
Yeah, another friend told me to come to a class with her. I'm like the most suggestible person you've ever met. Like, you could bring me somewhere and I'm like, all right, I'll try to write that. So really, a friend was taking a writing for youth class. She said, come with us and see what you think. And I had no idea what I was going to write about. I was, really worried that I was going to get in there and just say, like, this is completely ridiculous. I can't do this. But then the story kind of came to me, and the voice came to me. And that was really great. I mean, I would love to, some point try to do it again, because I really felt like I channeled my inner 13-year-old. And I feel like I got Layla's voice right. And that's 9/10 of the battle is getting your character in the right place. So yeah, I think a meaningful book. I mean, it's about a girl who's got undiagnosed dyslexia, and she's going into eighth grade, and there's a new English teacher, and he kind of recognizes her potential. And she has a moment where she almost blows everything up, because that's my that's my bent. So she kind of has a moment of juvenile delinquency, or yeah, I won't tell you, but she does something destructive. But she's able to come back from it, and she has people around her that are able to support her coming back from it. So it's been great. I just won a Moonbeam Children's Award for it, Gold Award.
wow.
So I don't know, I'm excited about that. So yeah, I mean, and it's COVID. So getting into the schools has been nigh impossible. I mean, I've been to
Yeah.
3 or 4 schools. So I'm hopeful, and things clear up and they start letting people back in, I'll be able to get around with the book a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just even with book promotions, I talked to a lot of authors this past year, and it's like opinions are kind of split on even, doing book promotions. A lot of people miss kind of being in the bookstores, doing live events, meeting people face to face, doing the signings. And then there's some people who are like, I'm happy as a clam, just doing this by Zoom and not having to travel, and just,
Yeah. It's
keeping
just
all that.
hard to sell books on Zoom.
Oh, I hear you.
No.
I hear you.
So
Um, well, let's talk about the latest one. Both Are True, which I know was out recently, sort of end of October. Actually, this was last week or this
yeah,
week.
October 5th.
October 5th. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
I'm looking at the book cover right now. It's a beautiful, beautiful book cover. It looks like, is this Central Park? Do I have
Yeah,
that
that's Central
location
Park.
correct?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Wow. So tell me about this book, Both Are True. It seems like you're returning to some legal roots here.
Right, back to the law. So this is it is set in New York City. It's a kind of a combination love story, courtroom drama. The female protagonist, Jackie Martin, is a family court judge, and that's really, as I say, kind of was inspired by my early work in family court. And she's very controlling and uptight, and she kind of feels like she's a new judge. She's very smart, but she feels like she can fix all the dysfunction in her courtroom by kind of sheer force of will. And she's kind of approached her personal life the same way until she falls for Lou Greenberg. And Lou's kind of her polar opposite. He's laid back, he's enjoys life, he wants to be a writer, and he fancies himself kind of a sensitive guy. But on the same note, he tends to leave the people that he loves. So pretty early on, the relationship kind of hits a snag, and we kind of watch it and watch them both grow and figure out what they would do for love. Who do they want to be? And what does it mean to them?
So I mean, I'm
sorry.
going.
No, I was going to say there's a lot of law in there, because she's a family court judge, and we just kind of see the cases that come before her and what they do to her, and how she develops her own sense of compassion and who she wants to be. And then she kind of winds up across the courtroom from Lou at one point. So,
oh, intriguing. I was going to ask, is this more of sort of a legal law story, or is it more of a love story?
Yeah, it's kind of both. Yeah, I mean, the climactic events have to do with the case between the two of them. So
got it. And I was just kind of learning, just looking at the write-up here on your website. It seems as if Lou has some unresolved feelings towards his ex-wife. Is that right?
His ex-wife. Yeah. Yeah. So listen, family is a complicated thing, right? And the pulls family, have on you, and he's got a, stepdaughter, and, nothing is easy and clean. That's my view. I don't know. We like to think things can be put into little boxes, and this is all, so obvious, but I don't think that's true in life. I think there's all sorts of mess.
I have to agree. No one tells you how messy life can actually be. And when you're a kid, I think, at least I did anyway, my parents have been together, I think 64 years
Wow.
this past October.
Oh my God.
They're both in their late 80s now. And, you see that, I think about that. I'm like, wow. I mean, they're much more the exception than the rule these days anyway.
Yeah.
But they sheltered us from actually seeing the world the way it is. And now I'm in my late 40s. I'm thinking, gosh, life really isn't all that clean.
Yeah.
Things do get like when you see the relationship status on Facebook saying it's complicated,
Yeah.
like that can be very true.
Right.
It's almost like the perfect relationship status, because things do get complicated, and
Of course.
especially, you raise children. My children are adults now. I have three in college, and
Wow.
and you and you see that things aren't just. It's not just about love anymore. I think there's some other issues that kind of arise as well. So, yeah, does life gets messy. No one tells you that though.
No.
There should be a course on it somewhere,
That's
like
true.
you took the course at Sarah Lawrence. There should be another course, life is messy 101.
I used to think that when they sent you home with the baby from the hospital, I'm like, how are they sending me home with this child? Don't they understand? I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
Oh my gosh. So we have triplets. So,
Oh my God.
yeah,
Wow.
they didn't send us home with just one child. They
Yeah.
sent us home with three, although they
Oh,
were
I can't
staggered because
imagine.
they staggered a little bit because they were underweight, but, um, yeah, that's the truth too. I mean, John,
Wow.
I came in here, I had zero kids.
Right.
I'm leaving
Right.
here, I have three kids.
Right.
I
That's
haven't changed
amazing.
at all in those 3 days.
Wow. That's
You
really
know,
quite something.
that's funny. That's funny. So what are you working on now? What's are you outlining anything at the moment or?
Yeah, I just started. I actually just you mentioned writing groups, and I just started with a new one, which I'm excited about. This group I've been trying to get into for years, and they would never have me. But then somebody left, and they said, all right, you can come now." So that's great, and it's interesting. I've done classes. I've never really done a workshop like this, where like each week, it's not each week, every 2 weeks, we're allowed to bring in like 1,000 words, and everybody reads it and makes comments, and it's great. I mean, it's really helpful, like you were saying about getting feedback. On the other hand, like the idea of doing like 3 or 4 pages at a time, I'm finding difficult because
Hmm.
it's making it so I can't really write forward, because I'm still thinking like, oh, but this week they're going to read pages, 9 through 12. I can't start again at page 50 or wherever I was when I don't know. It's just like the whole thing is, I'm having a hard time figuring out how to utilize their feedback in the best way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know.
Totally, totally. I think you'll learn over time, though. I think that's one of those things
I hope
where,
so. Yeah.
yeah,
I like the people a lot. I mean, I respect the people a lot. They're all people I had classes with at Sarah Lawrence. So it's great. It's just interesting
yeah.
transition.
How's the interaction? Are you doing it on Zoom or can you meet in person
No, we're
or?
meeting in person, which I hope is okay.
Yeah,
Until
I'm
somebody
sure.
gets sick, it's okay. But right now it's okay. So
Yeah, I mean, it seems fine to me. Look, I just flew to the West Coast and spent 4 days in California, so I'm sure writing should be okay. I mean, kind of working in a writer's workshop should be
yeah,
okay. I
I
would
think
hope.
so.
Um, well, any events that you want to promote? Do you have any events kind of coming around? Both are true that you want to promote, or
Yeah, I mean, some of them are, still Zoom events. I have a UJA event on November 4th, which is a Zoom event, if anybody wants interested in that. Yeah, you know what? It's been quiet, and I'm trying to get now into book groups, mostly. If people are interested in that, I would love to come and visit. And I also do a lot of law firms, so that's been kind of the bread and butter of it, which is great, because it's a group of people, and the law firm gets the books for them, and I come in, I do a lunch, lunch and learn, whatever with them. So I'm doing stuff like that, but those are more kind of private events within the firms. So yeah, I'm happy to do. If anybody wants me to come and speak, I'm available.
well, there you are. And then where can people buy both or true or any of your previous works?
So certainly online, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, bookshop.org if you want to get to your local indie bookstore. Here in Scarsdale, Bronx River Books has it, right on the table. But I don't know anywhere else. I think you pretty much have to go in and order it. So
Sure. Sure. Well, very good. Well, Rena, this has been fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I know we had to reschedule earlier at our first go around, but I do appreciate you making the time now.
thank you. I really love being here.